I wanted to watch the Trump Liberation Day speech, as he recently has announced a of tariffs, and they're significant. There was a bit of a dip, 2% dip in the Dow, I was told, where they had still coming in. But I did want to watch the speech, and I wouldn't want to watch it with anybody but you guys. I wouldn't want to. I just wouldn't want to. So I'm not going to. I'm just going to watch it with you guys. I haven't seen it yet. I was busy doing like yard cleanup and shit. So let's watch Trump's Liberation Day speech, as he calls it. Should be interesting. Looking forward to it. Second here, guys.
He's underway. Here's Donald Trump.
Waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. Going to make it wealthy, good and wealthy. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago, and you are now, but you don't too often, and for many years and decades even, you didn't hear too much about. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal. That means they do it to us and we do it to them.
By the way, I got a hold of the flow chart, at least the one that was given out by the Trump administration, which showed how big the disparity in tariffs are versus the counter tariffs. China was something like 60 plus percent, and the United States is slapping a 32% tariff back. It's not even equal with the amount that they tariff us. Big fan of you and your debates. Any tips for emotional regulation during the conflict? Smoke. That's my tip. They're going to get the little Family Guy dude. You know, the one who's like, smoke. Are you smoking yet? That's my tip, bro.
Very simple. Can't get any simpler than that. This is one of the most important.
Nope, they put a tariff on it too. Didn't have a very high tariff against us to begin with. It looked in the chart like it was 19%, and then we tariffed them back 10%, which actually proportionally is much more than we're doing with a lot of nations. So just pointing that out. Neil McCoy, Andrew not brave enough to speak out against it. Oh yeah, well here's the thing, Neil. I'll tell you what. I'll drop the entire thing right now, and I'll have you come on here, and you can turn your camera on, and you can say all the things you want to say about it. You want to do that real quick? Will that make you happy, Neil? You can come on here, and you can say whatever you want. You can say whatever it is that you want to say, as long as you turn your camera on. That sound good? No, you're not going to do that? Not going to do that. But anyway, yeah, it was, at least that's what they sent out, it was 19%. Of the that they had a 19% on us, and then ours was 10% back, which was actually proportionally higher than it was with a lot of nations.
Days, in my opinion, in American history, it's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper, and in so doing, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt, and it'll all happen very quickly. With today's action, we are finally going to
Yeah, at least the table that they sent out. Let me see. I think I took a screenshot of it. I can read the table out here real quick. Hang on a second. Let me take a look. Yep. Here's the reciprocal tariff sent out by Trump. Let me look at what it was for. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. I got that wrong. So it was 33% to 17% tariffs from us. And then the Philippines, 34% to 17%. So it seems like it's proportional, at least there. So, okay, so I was incorrect there. I got that table incorrect. Turkey, 10% to 10%. China, they're saying 67% to 34%, reciprocal. European Union has 39% and to 20% reciprocal. So Vietnam, 90% tariffs. He put a proportional 46%. So it looks like he kept the proportions the same all the way across, including with it. So I don't even know I don't know how you can complain about that. They're proportional to all the nations, including.
Be able to make America great again, greater than ever before. Jobs and factories will come roaring back into our country, and you see it happening already. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. And ultimately, more production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices for consumers. This will be indeed the golden age of America. It's coming back. We're going to come back very strongly. We're pleased to be joined on this momentous occasion by Vice President J.D. Vance. J.D., thank you.
See, unlike many people, I don't see the doom and gloom from the idea of these tariffs. Tariffs have always traditionally been the way that we raised money for our nation. That's one. And if it's a good segue into us lowering the income tax, considering we can't pay for the nation now, it seems like a wise idea to do something about how lopsided these deficits are. And they are very lopsided. So these reciprocal tariffs seem completely fair. The fact of the matter is, though, is they're like, well, wait a second, it's going to raise consumer goods. It's like, yeah, but we're getting ripped off. Like, you understand that you're still paying way more for the good because the United States is getting ripped off, sending goods elsewhere. They tax them at 90%. It's nuts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Where are you, J.D.? No, that was a...
At the Crucible, not everything is 90%. Most are around 15% in regard to Vietnam. I'm just reading you what the Trump reciprocal tariff chart was that they released by country. So I obviously don't think that every single tariff on every single good is as high as 90%. So I don't know how they came up with the numbers. If it's some kind of average, like I'm not sure exactly how they came up with it. I haven't had time to look into it yet.
Too hard to find. I was looking, he likes to take a low-key attitude, so usually we sit right in front. He's gaining a lot of confidence, Mike, isn't he? And nearly my entire cabinet is here, as well as...
Fair or not, tariffs are disastrous for the economy? I don't think so. Not if you win the trade wars with the tariffs. Then it'll be the least disastrous thing we've ever done for our economy. It'll be the least. Imagine American businesses being able to export goods without these tariffs from these other nations, right? It's going to make more money. It's going to assist our tax base here. And it's going to incentivize companies to come back. It's not a disaster for the economy. There may be effects in the economy which are negative in the short term. I don't give a right? I'm convinced that people cannot seem to understand that there's always going to be turbulent times in a nation where there's going to have to be self-sacrifice for correction. We are in one of those times where there's going to be self-sacrifice for correction. But we do this every day in our normal lives, right? We put money away when we'd rather spend it, for instance, on frivolous like guns. We put money away so that down the road we can apply it We take the pain now so that down the road we can get the fruits and the yields from us kind of, taking the small amount of pain now so that we can get the massive reward later. For some reason, though, here inside the United States, this idea is completely foreign to people. They're like, if there's in any way, shape, or form any sort of self-sacrifice that I have to do in order to make huge gains on behalf of the nation, I'm not going to do it. And I think that's a really stupid mindset to have ultimately.
Speaker Mike Johnson has done an amazing job. And with the great success we had last night in Florida, we have a majority of 7. And 7's like a lot when we had it at 1, right? You've done a fantastic job. And many of the members of the House and Senate are with us. Senators, congressmen, thank you all for being with us. The
problem is they're not cutting spending. Well, I mean, they're making an attempt at it, right? They're at least trying to make the attempt with auditing through Doge and these other things. But I mean, how do you cut spending when you have Social Security? Like what are you going to cut? Entitlements are just a complete wallet drain. There's so little left over after entitlements to begin with. It's like, I don't know exactly what you would do to begin the spending controls. You can obviously go after the military, right? But I don't know. I think that cutbacks in the military ultimately will be very bad for the U.S. dollar, it being the reserve currency because of our Navy, right? So there's some give and takes here. Brian says the Constitution gives the power of taxation solely to Congress. The executive imposing taxes, a blatant usurpation of this power, an act of treason. Treason is a high crime. The House must impeach, the Senate convict. Well, first of all, you're stupid, Brian S. You're stupid. Let's go over this so that you understand a couple things. If it were the case that we were following the Constitution when it came to assessing taxes, you would never have an income tax because that would have been considered unconstitutional. That's why they had to pass it via an amendment, right? Having something which was a non-proportion tax was, absurd. You know what I mean? No way to avoid it. It's proportional to income. That would have made our founders roll over in their grave, right? The other thing is that I think that the president can actually legally impose tariffs. I think he has the power to do so. I think that Congress can levy taxes on the citizens of the United States, but I think he is within his power to do this. Now, could get challenged in the court, and I could end up being wrong. But, I mean, at this point, they play so fast and loose with the Constitution anyway. It's like, I don't know who gives a at this point. Almost like, who follows it now anyway?
Appreciate it. For decades, the United States slashed our trade barriers on other countries while those nations placed massive tariffs on our products and created outrageous non-monetary barriers to decimate our industries. And in many cases, the non-monetary barriers were worse than the monetary ones. They manipulated their currencies, subsidized their exports, stole our intellectual property, imposed exorbitant VAT taxes to disadvantage our products, adopted unfair rules and technical standards, and created.
Okay. So I just pulled it up just to make sure. Congress has long enacted laws authorizing the president to adjust tariff rates on goods in certain circumstances. So it does appear that that he can indeed adjust these tariffs. So just pointing that out.
Created filthy pollution havens. They were absolutely filthy, but they always came to us and they said, we're violating, we should pay for it. It's all detailed in a very big report by the U.S. Trade Representative on Foreign Trade.
I guess lawmakers shouldn't have authorized that, huh?
Trade barriers. And I'll just hold it up for you. It's available and you don't have to pay too much. As I understand it, you'll pay nothing. It's a lot of work for something, actually, because it's a special book. It's frankly, it's very upsetting when you read it, when you see what people have been doing to us for 30 years. This all happened with no response from the United States of America, none whatsoever. But those days are over. Let me offer just a few examples of the vicious attacks our workers have faced. for so many years. The United States charges other countries only.
Are they ignoring or just don't understand the fact that tariffs are a form of economic warfare and the country is at threat at all times without tariffs? No. You have to understand that there's entire global establishments and NGOs which are completely funded by bribing Congress, by telling certain members of Congress, hey, we're going to fund your reelection campaign through super PACs and and things like this, basically dark money. And oftentimes these places have foreign bodies which they benefit from all of the free trade, whereas we get screwed over by that free trade. So, for instance, let's say that you're a company in Vietnam, right? And let's say that the tariff, this is hypothetical, right? I don't know what the exact rate is, but just hypothetically speaking, let's say that the rate for the goods which are coming in that you're importing from the United States, only have a 2% tax versus the ones that you're exporting, right? Now those have like a 30% tax or something, right? The cost of doing business in Vietnam would not be very good. But what if you reverse that? So this is the same idea, right? The idea here is, hey, we're going to utilize these tariffs in order to balance the playing field so that we don't have these deficits where companies can move to these foreign areas and then take advantage of their tax system and the stupid tax system of the United States, which allows we allow ourselves to get ripped off by letting them tax our goods while we don't tax theirs at all. Stupid. That's actually stupid, by the way.
A 2.4 tariff on motorcycles. Meanwhile, Thailand and others are charging much higher prices, like 60%.
What do NGOs have to do with tariffs? Well, I'll tell you if you want me to. So there's tons of non-governmental organizations and think tanks which are actually funded by private industries, oftentimes from foreign money in private industry. And they definitely have a huge incentive to keep the tax rates coming on imported goods where those companies are extremely low so that they can maximize profits. And so if you want ideas of like NGOs that have done this for years, all you got to do is think about Big Tobacco. I mean, Big Tobacco was, and Philip Morris, they had NGO think tanks all over the place, and they were running a multi-nation operation essentially. So you have that kind of power, and you can get your money in American politics. You can actually direct NGOs to come out with studies and all sorts of things, economic studies even, showing that there will be doom and gloom if you actually protect yourself from these various things. And they seem to work to various degrees. So if you think that NGOs have nothing to do with any of this, you're quite wrong. The non-governmental organizations, I would argue, have more power these days over government than the government has over itself.
India charges 70%, Vietnam charges 75%, and others are even higher than that. Likewise, until today, the United States has for decades charged a 2.5 tariff. Think of that, 2.5% on foreign-made automobiles. The European Union charges us more than 10% tariffs, and they have 20% VATs, much, much higher. India charges 70%, and perhaps worst of all are the non-monetary restrictions imposed by South Korea, Japan, and very many other nations. As a result of these colossal trade barriers, 81% of the cars in South Korea are made in South Korea. 94% of the cars in Japan are made in Japan. Toyota sells 1 million foreign-made automobiles into the United States, and General Motors sells almost none. Ford sells very little. None of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. And I say that, friend and foe. And
it's actually kind of wild when you think about it, too. Like, just take a bird's eye view for a second. If we were in a physical conflict or a physical war with other nations, and the kind of top-down messaging to the public was, look, this is a serious war, and we're going to need, through the kind of patriotic propaganda and things like this, for there to be some self-sacrifice. Maybe there's going to be a bit less at the grocery store, right? Maybe there's going to be a bit more you pay in taxes as this conflict goes, right? But for the purposes of the conflict, there's going to be a bit of self-sacrifice, like every war we've ever had. But when it comes to economic warfare, so all of a sudden, like this idea that there might be some temporary pain so that we can get some great long-term results just goes right out the window. Just goes right out the window.
In many cases, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade. But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles. Thank you. Brian, I'd like to have you come up here for a second, okay? I just see him sitting. He's been a fan of ours, and he...
U.S. company gets tariffed in Japan. They have to raise the prices passed to consumer. JP companies are outselling the same product because it's cheaper to the consumer. JP gets richer, which they subsidize their company with. Makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Understands this business a lot better than the economists, a lot better than anybody. Brian, say a few words, please, would you? Thank you, Mr. Thank you. It's a great honor to have you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I grew up just north of Detroit, Michigan, in Macomb County, known as the home of the Reagan Democrats. My first vote for president was for...
Yeah, and Macomb County now is a by the way. Just pointing that out. Macomb County, Michigan. Terrible.
Ronald Reagan. I thought that was going to be the best president I ever saw in my lifetime until Donald J. Trump came along. I have watched my entire life, I have watched plant after plant after plant in Detroit and in the Metro Detroit area close. There are now plants sitting idle. There are now plants that are underutilized, and Donald Trump's policies are going to bring product back into those underutilized plants. There's going to be new investment. There's going to be new plants built. And the UAW members, and I brought 20 of them with me. They're sitting right over here.
There's actually, I was about to make fun of this guy for wearing the stupid yellow vest. You know, I hate the yellow vest. You know, I just hate the yellow vest. Yeah, it's every factory on planet Earth, if you walk outside for 5 seconds, you got to wear a yellow safety vest, you know. Every time. Every time. But anyway, in this case, though, because it is at a Trump speech, I'm not so sure that you want to stand out at a podium. You might not want to stand out at a podium with something really brightly colored that you can see from really far away. Just pointing that out, you know, like, you know, some of these speeches, there have been things which have happened in the past, unfortunately, right? So I'm not sure that the yellow vest was the safest option, ultimately.
Support Donald Trump's policies on tariffs 100%. So, Mr. President, we can't thank you enough. And in 6 months or a year, we're going to begin to see the benefits. I can't wait to see what's happening 3 or 4 years down the road. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much. Thank you. What a great guy. He got it right from the beginning. He got it before almost anybody else. This group over there, they got it too. And you know, we won the state of Michigan. We won almost all of them, but we won Michigan by a lot. And I want to just thank you all. The auto workers were fantastic. The Teamsters were fantastic. Everyone was pretty good, I will tell you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You're going to be very happy very soon. And
this guy says in the chat, he's like, bro, work for Mossad. Well, let me give you a couple of arguments for why I wouldn't. One, I'm very expensive. And two, I'm told that particular group might be known for being cheap. Just saying. Not that you can't buy me. I just think you couldn't afford me. I just think you couldn't afford me.
You probably see what's happening with all of the, not only car companies, but car companies in particular. You see it with all of the ones they're moving. They're announcing day in, day out. You're seeing it. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. With today's actions, we're also standing up for our great farmers and ranchers who are brutalized by nations all over the world. Brutalized. Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. They do the first.
Yeah, Canada. Would you say economic warfare helped bring down the USSR and can help bring down China over time if wanted? Tariffs level the field, but can be used as a form of warfare, correct? Just clarifying. Both are true, yeah. Both are true at the same time. The idea that Trump seems to have right now is just trying to balance out the deficits between these nations. Just the idea, like, if you're really actually going to, if we're going to be playing fair here, right, then if you're going to impose all these taxes on our goods, we're going to impose your taxes back. Now, what about the potential that he wins? Like, let's say, for instance, that these countries do end up dropping their tariffs because they lose these trade wars. Isn't then the leftist argument going to collapse? Wouldn't they have to then say, then that necessarily means that all product prices are going to go down, right? So all he has to do is win some of these trade wars where they lower the tariff, and then necessarily the product prices go down, and the businesses necessarily make more money, right? Isn't that the case? So their own argument, which is, oh, the tariffs are going to make prices go up. It's like, okay, well, then that means that if other countries drop their tariffs, it's going to make goods and consumption for those people much lower, and our businesses can maximize profits. And also, for our use, our tariffs go back down, and then our goods go down as well. So it's like it's a double win, right? Isn't that the entire point, right? So the leftists are going to actually have to be beholden to their own argument here.
The first can of milk, they do the first little carton of milk at a very low price, but after that it gets bad, and then it gets up to 275, 300%. So when they're figuring what's Canada charging, they say, oh, about 2%, 3%. But take a look at what happens down the road. When you look a little bit, it's not a pretty picture, and we don't like it, and it's not fair. It's not fair to our farmers. It's not fair to our country. And with countries like Canada, you know, we subsidize a lot of countries and keep them going and keep them in business. In the case of Mexico, it's $300 billion a year. In the case of Canada, it's close to $200 billion a year. And I say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? I mean, at what point do we say you got to work for yourselves, and you got to? This is why we have the big deficit.
What I think about in Texas, charting a community in Texas. Look, here in the United States, at least as long as that old pesky Second Amendment is around, I've never considered here to be much of a threat. To be perfectly honest with you, the only reason there's such a threat in the UK is because the right to self-defense in the UK just doesn't exist. I mean, you can't have a damn pocket knife there. If you have a baseball bat in your car, you go to prison. You know what I mean? But here, the art of self-defense is alive and well still. And I don't, you know, they seem to behave here a lot more, don't they? You know, everybody in they make the communities, right? Well, they kind of stay the in those communities, don't they? They kind of stay in those communities a little bit, don't they? Because, you know, moving external and causing problems doesn't have the same, well, let's say, repercussion that it has here. Never will you see this play out better than when the BLM riots were going on. And I remember they went to the wrong house one day, and a fat man with glasses who looked like Peter Griffin came out with his hag of a wife. But she was armed with a small revolver and him with an AR. And that crowd very quickly straightened their shit out. Very quickly. They just kind of passed right along, didn't they? And then, of course, there was also a gentleman named Kyle. He put the boom in the word boomstick, didn't he? And suddenly you saw a bit more chill out factor, didn't you? You know, like, oh, wait. I also remember watching as those BLM rioters would move in. They tried several times to move into just outskirt suburbs. That was a big mistake. That was a big mistake. No sooner they get out there than they got run the right back out and back into the major metropolitan areas where the police would then protect them while they burned and looted. Remember that these people had police protection while they were burning and looting. But basically only major metropolitan areas that were under Democrat control had to suffer through that, because in the smaller rural areas and the suburbs, they didn't dare, because that would have spelt the end of it. They wouldn't have given a shit if there was police protection there or not. They didn't care. Good theory. He's using the art of the deal here, taking charge and raising tariffs on others in order to have them lower their tariffs on us. That's what it seems to be what the entire thing is, right?
This is why we have that amount of debt that's been placed on our heads over the last number of years, and we're really not taking it anymore. Through non-tariff barriers, the European Union bans imports of most American poultry. You understand? They say, we want to send you our cars, we want to send you everything, but we're not going to take anything that you have. Australia bans, and they're wonderful people and wonderful everything, but they ban American beef, yet we imported $3 billion of Australian beef from them just last year alone. They won't take any of our beef. They don't want it because they don't want it to affect their farmers. And you know what? I don't blame them, but we're doing the same thing.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I don't blame you. You know, it's going to affect the price of the meat in your home nation to import it. I completely understand why you would want to put your countries first. I get that. But we're just going to do the same thing. That's all. Imposing tariffs across the board over food sovereignty protectionism is not fair. Would you allow China to take over your food production market? Thing is that we do a huge amount of importing of meat from China. The U.S. is a massive exporter, but mostly of produce. California being one of the major places where it's grown. California, I think, provides the majority of produce for the entirety of the United States, that one state. So we're a mass exporter of food. I mean, we export a ton of it, but we also import quite a bit. We also import quite a bit of food. What Trump is saying is he's like, we don't really need to do that. We don't, if these people aren't going to accept the imports of our meat, why the fuck should we accept the import of their meat? Our farmers here can reap the benefits of the American citizens buying their products locally from those farmers, which, by the way, has been a thing that people have been talking about doing for years and years. The whole buy local move was something which has been predicted for a long time, and that's part of populism, is to buy domestic for the purpose of patriotism and for your fellow countrymen, rather than buying cheap from China and emboldening your enemies. That's a really terrible idea ultimately.
Right now, starting about midnight tonight, I would say. And China charges American rice farmers an overquota, it's called, a tariff rate of 65%. South Korea charges 50%. Actually, they charge different, from 50% to 513%. And Japan, our friend, charges us 700%. But that's because they don't want us selling rice, another thing. Who can blame them, Madam Secretary? Agriculture, great job you did on eggs, by the way. The egg prices came down 50%. You got them down 50%. Once we got involved, they were going through the sky. The egg prices, they were going through the sky, and you did a fantastic job. Now we have lots of eggs, and they're much cheaper, down about 59% now, and they're going down further. We charge 2.8% for so many things that other countries are charging 200%, 300%, and 400% for. If imposing tariffs and protective barriers made nations poor.
That's true. LRN News chimes in. He says the rest of the states in the Midwest grow corn and soy, and that's not really food. Exactly. In fact, most of the corn that's grown in the Midwest is feed corn. It's not designed for human consumption at all. It's fed to cows. The cows are corn-fed. It fattens them up a lot better than a grass diet. That's actually healthy for them. So they fatten them up with the field corn. Most of that field corn is going straight into a cow's belly. It's not ever seeing human consumption ever. So that's actually a good point. Dude, I'm not reading that, bro. I'm not reading that.
Or
Say it in at least bad English.
then every country on earth would be racing to eliminate these policies, and China would be the first on line. They run a very strong country, but they're not first in line, and the American people are paying a very big price. From 1789 to 1913, we were a tariff-backed nation, and the United States was proportionately the wealthiest it has ever been. So wealthy, in fact, that in the 1880s, they established a commission to decide what they were going to do with the vast sums of money they were collecting. We were collecting so much money so fast, we didn't know what to do with it. Isn't that a nice problem to have?
Yes. Yes, it is. And we can have that again because people will die to have access to our market, literally. I mean, they will do anything to access this market. It is the richest market on planet Earth with the most frivolous consumer spenders on planet Earth. Women. American women who will buy. They don't give a shit. They don't care. They'll buy your Chinese makeup product for $25.95. They don't give a shit. They don't care. In order to have access to this market, if their makeup goes up from $20 to $26, they don't give a. They'll pay that in seconds. They'll pay it so quick it'll give their husband a burn on his ass cheek from the lightning speed in which his wallet came out of his back pocket.
What do you think, Marco? Good problem? Marco would love that problem. But we don't have that problem anymore, but we're not going to have it very much longer, I will tell you. But they collected so much money, they actually formed a commission to determine what they were going to do with the money, who they were going to give it to, and how much. Then in 1913, for reasons unknown to mankind, they established the income tax so that citizens, rather than foreign countries, would start paying the money necessary to.
See, now this is Trump has brought this up multiple times, the income tax. It gives me great hope that what is the attempt here is to try to establish the burden of taxation on imports and exports where it initially belonged, rather than on individuals' income. That, if he was able to shift the burden to imports and exports and abolish the income tax, you're giving people a 4-month-a-year raise, man. You're giving people a 4-month-a-year raise by doing that. That would be an astronomical amount of money for the average Joe.
To run our government. Then in 1929, it all came to a very abrupt end with the Great Depression, and it would have never happened if they had stayed with the tariff policy. It would have been a much different story. They tried to bring back tariffs to save our country, but it was gone. It was gone. It was too late. Nothing could have been done. It took years and years to get out of that depression, far longer than even FDR had that office right over there for a long period of time. The ramp system, that's rather intricate, was built because of him, and every time you walk up, you think of him, and he did a great job in many ways, but it lasted long beyond his terms, as you know. But it's not too late any longer, and we're going to start being smart, and we're going to start being very wealthy again. We're going to be wealthy as a country because they've taken so much of our wealth away from us. We're not going to let that happen. We truly can be very wealthy. We can be so much wealthier than any country. It's not even believable, but we're getting smart. Nearly a century later, in the face of unrelenting economic warfare, the United States can no longer continue with a policy of unilateral economic surrender. We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries. We used to do it. We can't do it anymore. We take care of countries all over the world. We pay for their military. We pay for everything they have to pay. And then when you want to cut back.
Who's moving to Greenland anyway? Who's moving to Greenland? Who's going to be the first wave of American immigrants to Greenland when it becomes the 51st state? Who's going to Greenland? Who's taking one for the team? And they're going to go over and Americanize the Greenlander gals. Who's doing it? Larry lives matter. Yes, Larry lives do matter. That's true. Who's going to Greenland?
back a little bit. They get
Mexican Boy 3000. Hey, Andrew, let's talk about the mestizos again. What do you want to talk about? Are you still freaking out because you got decimated on Twitter when you said there was no such thing as any Mexican demo sites, which was complete. Just like I brought up with that chick, that the Mexican government also stole native land and committed democide to do it, and then gave you all of the proof that that's the case, and you never had any refutations. That you want to do that?
get upset that you're not taking care of them any longer, but we have to take care of our people.
How's Rosie O'Donnell doing over there in Ireland? You would think on a cabbage and potato diet she'd lose a little bit of her muscular build. I'm a UPS guy in Massachusetts. I make approximately $1,300 a week, and I lose $300 to $500 a week on federal income tax. Elimination of that would be life-changing for me. Yeah, you and everybody else. Yeah, I think that would bring your paycheck up to somewhere around what, $1,800, $1,900. At least $1,700. That's a huge increase in people's wages.
And we're going to take care of our people first, and I'm sorry to say that. And today we're standing up for the American worker, and we are finally putting America first. In Sleepy Joe Biden's last year in office, the United States hemorrhaged 100,000 manufacturing jobs, and the number was going through the roof at levels never seen before.
Typical lib stupidity. This will hurt the economy. The deficits allow the U.S. to focus on more profitable industries like tech, which contribute way more benefit compared to the deficit. Shut the up. Shut up. What? Who convinced you of that? A bunch of think tank, non-government organization studies convinced you that what we should do is invest in technocrats? We should invest in technocrats rather than have protectionist tariffs so that the countries can't rip our businesses off or create incentives for our businesses to leave our shores to go there. You really thought that was a good idea, buddy? You really think that what we should do instead is we should allow the U.S. to focus on more profitable industries like tech? Give me a break, dude. And by the way, it's like this idea of you can't still have heavy investment in tech, especially private equity in tech companies, right? And have big ass tariffs in order to offset these deficits. You can do both. You can do both. Greenland's going to buy and sell the mineral rights so I can super chat. Hopefully.
And our trade deficit reached a record $1.2 trillion, which is unheard of. Since the beginning of NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made. It was a horror show. I was able to terminate it. They all said you'd never be able to get it out. We had to get approval from Congress to get it terminated. We had to live with that deal. It was the worst trade deal ever made by far. But since the very beginning of NAFTA, our country lost 90,000 factories. Think of what that is, 90,000. Think about putting a map up and putting tax on it. You wouldn't have enough room.
I like when people say this when they're like, do the math when it comes to the offsets. Let me just here's some math. Let's point this math out. The United States can't afford right now to exist. How's that for some math? Can't afford it right now. Debt's huge. Absolutely huge. It gets bigger by the day, right? We can't afford our nation right this second. Like, what math do you want me to look at that surpasses that? We can't even afford our country right now. We can't afford it right this second.
80,000. I said, is that possible? We had it checked 4 different times, and it was actually somewhat higher than that. And 5 million manufacturing jobs were lost while racking up trade deficits of $19 trillion. That was the worst trade deal ever made. As a result of these gigantic losses, foreign nations now own $26 trillion more of American assets than think of this, than the Americans own of their own foreign assets or other foreign assets. I
actually don't know about this. I get it'll help American companies, but what about the everyday Joe? Will we be able to afford houses and families? be able to, the goal is that you can afford them better than ever because you have high paying jobs rather than service based jobs, which are trash in comparison to what you should be making in heavy industry. I mean, heavy industry jobs right now in heavy industry, if they were on par with where they were about 30 years ago, your entry level should be around $40 an hour. Right around, like, yeah, high 30s, $40 an hour. Your service-based side, your entry level is in the low 20s or in the high teens, $17, $18, $19 an hour. Or sometimes you can step into a job at a factory for 20, 21, running some machines or something like that, freezing your ass off or overheating, depending on what type you're working in. But you should be able to get these things on par where these companies are paying massive wages to incentivize people to come in and work. And I think that that's exactly what the goal here is.
The United States can no longer produce enough antibiotics to treat our sick. We have a tremendous problem. We have to go to foreign countries to treat our sick. If anything ever happened from a war standpoint, we wouldn't be able to do it. We import virtually all of our computers, phones, televisions, and electronics. We used to dominate the field, and now we import it all from different countries. A single shipyard in China now produces more ships every year than all of the American shipyards combined. Think of that. And it was a business that we used to dominate. We used to dominate it totally. In short, chronic trade deficits are no longer merely an economic problem. They're a national emergency that...
Well, it's a gamble, I agree. Hector makes this comment. To see any real impact to what Trump is trying to do, Republicans will need to win another election with the same agenda, just without the bloc's delays by the judiciary. Maybe not. Maybe not. So Trump has roughly, a little over 3.5 years, right? A little over 3.5 years for so he instituted these tariffs really very quickly. I think the goal is, year one, you see the pain, and then by year two, you start to see some of the collapse. By year three, you begin seeing a lot of the fruits, right? I think that that's what he's gambling on. Because you are right, these things take a long time to deal with, usually at least a couple of years, at least a year before you really start seeing sort of things begin to unravel when it comes to these trade wars. But, several years is far more likely. So I think that's why he's doing it early. And the goal there will be like, okay, wait a second, it's actually a great source of revenue. Why the would we get rid of this? That seems to be what his goal is, what his big gamble here is. President Trump announced sweeping global tariffs on Liberation Day, a risky move that he vowed would lure manufacturing back to the United States. Sorry, it's the taxes, not tariffs. What? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about there, bro.
That threatens our security and our very way of life. It's a very great threat to our country. And for these reasons, starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. We used to think about it a lot. We didn't think about it for many decades, and you see what's happened. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind. You're not so kind when you got ripped off with your salaries. My auto worker friends and my Teamster friends and all of the unions that typically voted Democrat, they're not voting Democrat anymore because worker, whether union or non-worker, they're for the Republicans now. That's what happened. But we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries who didn't want to do that. I'd like to see the chart if you have it. Could you bring it up, Howard?
It also eliminates your negotiating power. So the way that I would view this, I would think of it this way. So Trump says here, yeah, it would have been tough on a lot of countries. He doesn't give a shit about, about these other countries. But it does eliminate negotiating power, right, in a big way. Jamie Kennedy says pause. Yeah, I paused it. You know what you can do if you don't want to hear my commentary while we watch this? You can just go watch it. Like, you don't even need to be here, So people tune in because they want to hear what I have to say about it. They're not tuning in to just sit here and watch the video with me, Jamie Kennedy. So why don't you go yourself? Now back to this. Before I was so rudely interrupted by this tard in the chat. He's leaving himself negotiating power. That's it. He's leaving himself negotiating power. So he's saying, well, the thing is like, I could raise him a lot higher, guys. So let the pain set in a little bit, right? Let the pain set in and then say, hey, if I need to, I'll raise him even higher, right? I'll raise him even higher. And that's what he's doing ultimately.
This is our great Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. Thanks, Howard. So,
Andy M says, Andrew's a hack. Well, here's the thing, Andy M. That may be true, but I'm a really well-paid hack, and you're not even allowed in my chat now. How does that make you feel, Andy M?
If you look at...
You're just mad because all of your leftist princes get destroyed by me like it's nothing. They just get destroyed, and I don't even have to try. I don't even have to try, and I wreck them. I barely even have to do anything, and I wreck these people.
Look at that. China, first row. China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal.
The problem is he'll be blamed for the recession depression the world is headed into, which will not bottom until 8/25/2028. Economists widely criticize tariffs for deepening the global trade collapse and the Great Depression. Yeah, but economists also widely criticize Trump's original economic policies, which ended up with the highest, I mean, stock market was soaring, jobs were everywhere. And by the way, as a continuation of those tax cuts, I believe that still kept, have still kept people employed. Right now, if you want a job somewhere, you're probably going to get it. There's a labor shortage, that's fantastic for the purpose of negotiation if you have a skill. So no, and by the way, I'm not convinced that we're heading towards a recession, nor definitely not a depression. I know that we now have the private equity kind of scandal, which is coming up that everybody's talking about. I saw that on Rogan, that private equity is pulling out of various companies which are profitable because there's a bubble which is coming that's going to burst. But it doesn't seem like it's anywhere on par with what the housing bubble was or even the .com bubble. So I'm not so sure that we're going to have a legitimate recession nor depression. I'm not convinced of that.
Tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be because we never charge anybody anything. But now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals.
Yes, Adrian, I remain
And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually. They're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough, great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46% and much higher for certain items like cars, little items like cars. 46%, we're charging them 24%. India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The prime minister just left, and he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades, and it was only 7 years ago when I came in, we started with China and charged them. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in tariffs, and they understood, honestly. President Xi understood. He said, look, I understand, and the other countries, and they all understand, we're going to have to go through.
Yeah, I just love this. The libs in chat, always upset. You guys fall for this stuff every single time. I don't know if you guys know this, like you stupid liberals, right? But we were all alive when Trump was president the first time. We were all alive. All of us in this chat, we were alive then. And it was great. It was awesome. What was gas like? $2? It got down less. Less, $2 a gallon. Right? He lowered those. When he lowered the corporate tax rate, tons of people got bonuses, including me. Including me. I got a $7,000 bonus. $7,000. It was plant wide. And it went off of your position. Even people who were hired in only 3 weeks prior, they got a little bit of a bonus. It wasn't much. It was a couple $100, but it was a couple $100 they weren't expecting. Like, we were alive. And this attempt to kind of gaslight us into believing that, oh, when it was a continuation of the Obama policies, we were alive for his policies too. We were alive for that too. And that was a show. And he couldn't fucking find a job in the Midwest. You couldn't get a job at a gas station in the Midwest without 15 applicants because there weren't any. There weren't any jobs. Rural America was not working. They were destitute. They were decimated. Suddenly, the fires of industry came back under this guy, and people were getting employed everywhere. There's dairy plants opening. There's plants opening all over the place. Private equity was surging. Interest rates were at a huge low. He capped them off. We were here. Like, did you not get that? Like, did you not understand that we were here? That we were alive under this? And so when you kind of attempt to tell us like, oh, you fell for this the first time, it's like, yeah, it was great. It was great. Everybody was doing better under this guy. And that's all they remembered when they went and voted against Kamala Harris, was that they weren't doing very good under your guy. Which is why he was a one-term president out, and this guy's a two-termer, because nobody did very good under your guy. I'm in the trucking industry. We've been down since 2019. Biden's idiocy ruined us. We have an average cost of $2.20 per mile. The average load on the freight boards at or below $2 a mile. The tariff system will fix it so fast. Really? Huh. You have to DM me that with the stats. That's interesting. I was jumping for joy in my college dorm room when he won in 2016. Loved every minute of that first term. Yeah, it was great, dude. We were there. That's why. So when people were, when these liberals try to come in and talk their, you know what I mean? I can't believe you guys fall for this. I can't believe this. It's like, we were there when you were accusing this guy of, you know, colluding with and all kinds of crazy ass to try to impeach him. Right? We all got good jobs. We were getting good jobs and bonuses. Okay? And the Midwest went back to work. And it was awesome. And the gas was cheap. And you could afford a home. You could get loans for homes, and they were affordable, and the interest was at an all-time low, and people were refinancing their houses. They're refinancing their house at a lower interest rate and then pulling equity out to buy really cool that they had always wanted. It was a awesome time to be alive. And your guy came in and ruined it all. But Andrew, Orange Man has always been bad. Yeah. Orange Man always bad.
A little tough love, maybe. but they all understand. They're ripping us off, and they understood it. Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. He was a fantastic man. He was unfortunately taken from us, assassination. But I went to him and I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. A trade is not fair. He said, I know that. I know that. And he was a great gentleman. He was a fantastic man, but he understood immediately what I was talking about. I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. He said, I know that. And we worked out a deal, and it would have been a much better deal, but frankly, there were many years left on the deal that was made previous to my getting there, but it was something. If you look at Switzerland, 61% to 31%, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia. Oh, look at Cambodia, 97%. We're going to bring it down.
Yeah, in Idaho under Trump, we saw gas at $1.65, which I hadn't seen since 1998. So it was wild, man. In fact, in Michigan, it would have been cheaper than it was, except for the amount of Michigan taxes that they put on the gas in order to pay for our roads, which they claimed when they brought the lottery in that was going to pay for the infrastructure and we wouldn't have to pay property taxes anymore. Well, that was a lie. Boy, that was a lie and a half.
Under 49, they made a fortune with the United States of America. United Kingdom, 10%, and we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing. South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa.
First of all, when you're talking about Keynesian economics, it's not a progressive or non-progressive system. Just because progressives adopted it for various purposes that they had, doesn't even mean that Keynesianism is a bad economic system. You know what I mean? It was heavily criticized mostly by the laissez-faire capitalists on the libertarian side, who think that the free market with no restraint whatsoever can just take care of all sorts of problems and won't poison you in order to maximize profits. Well, turns out that wasn't true. Turns out that's not true. They don't. So, no, first of all, it's not conservative. Conservative, the meaning of it is to have conservation of thing. What is the thing we're trying to conserve here? What is the thing we're trying to conserve here? Mostly it's culture. And it comes to economics, right? We're supposed to be putting America first at the expense of all other nations. We don't care about them. We're putting our people group first. If that's an economic system which is viable for the purpose of doing that, that's fine. But Keynesian economics and supply and demand side is widely misunderstood anyway. 100% correct. I'm at Ohio, and these last 4 years have been hell. Before that, glorious. Yeah, it was glorious, man. Hey, Andrew, hope you and Rachel are doing well. Yeah, we're doing okay. Just a lot of yard cleanup.
Africa, we're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it. Brazil, 10%, 10%. Bangladesh is 74%. So you see what's going on. Pakistan, 58%.
Yeah, I remember that. That was the dumbest thing that guy's ever said when I was debating with Destiny. And I was like, well, economists look at the historic standard when they're making predictions for the future. And he's like, no, they don't. Not at all. An elementary school level economic model, they don't look into it. No economists don't look at history at all. I was like, what is this guy talking about? That was maybe the dumbest thing Destiny's ever said to me. And he said some stupid to me before. He has said some stupid. By the way, I just want to point out that I did tell him that there was not going to be a roofing or flooring robot that was accessible to to normal builders and construction workers a few years back when he predicted that there would be. And I just want to point out that I was also right about that.